On this episode, we delve into the sin of lust with our do's and don'ts advice for visiting Bangkok's red light districts.
So, if you're coming here as a tourist or live here as an expat, you'll probably get some good insight from this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 to try some meditation, and after 20 years of practice, I can finally say that I went a full 3 minutes without thinking about email or what's on Twitter. So, progress.
Dude, that's enlightenment, man. You're a Buddha now.
Almost there.
And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract exactly 20 years ago. Fell in love with showing up late to a meeting or event and finding out that I was the first person there. So I never left.
It's like, well, it's just you and me again, Ed.
I guess this is a different culture. I'll just wait. All right. So we want to say a quick thank you to one of our patrons, Jonathan Morrell, or Morrell, I'm not sure, who supports us at the show shout-out level. Stick around after we're done with Lust, part 2 of our series covering Bangkok's 7 deadly sins, to hear why we are going to add Jonathan to our short but exclusive list of trusted Bangkok craft beer guides and what that has to do with an overweight bovine. And a huge thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our regular show a day early, behind-the-scenes photos and videos of our interviews, discounts on swag, which you can find on our website, and various other things that aren't available to regular listeners. But best of all, patrons like Jonathan also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and random topics. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we chatted about a tweet that Greg sent that went viral, for real, causing a little bit too much attention. The fate of Richard Barrow after immigration kept him dangling for a few days. And, of course, an update on the ongoing student protests, which feel like they're getting increasingly close to the red line. To become a patron, head to bangkokpodcast.com/support.
Now, we also talked about 2 sort of important anniversaries. Ed, you have been here exactly 20 years today.
In 2 hours, I will have been in Thailand for 20 years.
That's great. And it was just over 10 years ago that the first episode of the Bangkok Podcast came online. So, boom.
Impressive.
Big year for us. Okay, well, before we jump into it, everyone, we just want to remind you all that if you have an idea for a show or an interview or something that we can build an episode around, please let us know. As you can imagine, coming up with new topics every week can sometimes be a bit of a struggle, so we thought we'd remind y'all that we're always open to ideas from our listeners, and I'll tell you what, if we use your idea, we'll even send you some swag, some fridge magnets or something like that, and we'll also give you a credit on your show. So, yeah, if you can think of something, drop us a line, bangkokpodcast@gmail.com.
In short, guys, we need ideas. So please help us out.
Man. Yeah, it's hard coming up with whack stuff every week.
That's right.
I'm creative, but, there are limits.
Right.
All right. Well, on this episode, we continue our series that puts our own spin on the famous 7 deadly sins and how they apply to Bangkok. Now, a few weeks ago, we did pride. And now this week, we're going to jump right into the deep end with lust.
Whoa.
Yeah. Now, it's a bit of a hot button topic, and there's not a lot of ways we can go about this without going straight into X-rated territory, which obviously we don't want to do. So Ed and I did some brainstorming, and we figured out that this episode would be our advice gained from years of playing tour guide, going to bachelor parties, and living vicariously through others. Our advice for visiting some of Bangkok's well-known red light districts, more specifically Soi Cowboy, Soi Patpong, and Nana Plaza. Which brings us to our main caveat of the show. The official position of the Bangkok Podcast is that if you are visiting as a tourist, you can probably swing by one of these places, take a few photos outside, and be on your way. For most people, there are much more interesting things to do in Bangkok, and you don't have to worry about getting yourself tied up in the complicated moral issues that come with being a patron of an area famous for prostitution. And if you're not a tourist and you live here, well, you've probably made your mind up on this issue a long time ago, so you do you. But these places exist, they are very popular, and there are some things you should do and some things you should definitely not do when you visit. Oh man, this is a long introduction. So, with all that in mind, being totally honest here, neither Ed nor I are big red light district guys. I think I can speak for you, Ed, when I say that we would much rather sit at a pub with our friends discussing politics and music, or go out for a nice dinner somewhere with our wives. However, you can't live in Thailand for 20 years, especially as a male expat, and not gain some familiarity with the inner workings of these famous adult areas in Bangkok. So with that in mind, we thought we'd cover some of the do's, some of the don'ts, and some of the best to avoids if you do find yourself visiting one of these places.
Whoa, man! Long intro. I can sum it up this way: we don't necessarily recommend going to these red light areas, but we realize that just a huge number of expats and tourists are interested. It's funny because I know a bunch of Thai people who have told me that they're curious about these red light areas. So we don't recommend it, but if you're going to go, Greg and I are going to give you some advice that we have picked up on over the years. So I don't know, Greg, I was going to start, if you don't mind, I was going to start with some very basic advice. So in general, in Bangkok, there's 3 so-called red light districts: Soi Cowboy, Nana Plaza, and Pat Pong, or the Pat Pong Night Market. Now, so I just want to start by saying this. I think unless you have a specific reason for wanting to go to Pat Pong as opposed to the others, I think the other ones are better.
I would agree. Yeah, when I got here 19 years ago, Pat Pong was mad. It was crazy. It was party central. But these days, for a lot of different reasons, it's kind of a really sort of, kind of a shadow of its former self, save for the Pat Pong Museum, which is still very worth visiting. But if you're going down there
that's
looking
exactly
for
right.
Live music and partying, probably best to go somewhere else.
Well, I mean, that's the perfect caveat because you and I went to the Pat Pong Museum down there and we thought it was great. So I don't really recommend Pat Pong, but I do recommend the Pat Pong Museum. And so why do I think of the 3, Pat Pong is the worst to go to? In short, I think there are more tourists in Pat Pong, and anywhere there's concentrated tourists, you get more scams and just shitty situations, And so it's I think it's possible to enjoy yourself in Pat Pong. There's a night market, which typically would be crowded. Of course, now it's not, but typically it'd be very crowded. And it's just filled with hawkers and aggressive sellers, and there's constant haggling and negotiation, and it's crowded and sweaty. And there are kind of traditional go-go bars there that you can essentially kind of trust that you're not going to get scammed. But very famously, if you go up floors, here's the basic advice. If you do go to Pat Pong, stay on the ground floor. The pubs, the go-go bars on the 2nd and 3rd floors and above have very shady reputations.
Yeah, some dark stuff goes on up there. So if you find yourself sort of being led by a guy up some stairs and around a corner, then you either steal yourself for some crazy antics and keep your money close, or just turn around and go out.
Yeah, I mean, I would just stay on the ground floor. Anything above the 1st floor is famous for overpriced scams, where you just go into a place, you order a beer, and the bill's 1,000 baht.
And then very hard sells.
Yeah, and then if you protest, it's not like in the West where you can call the police. It's not like that. Like some very tough-looking guys will just show up if you don't pay the bill. So they're famous, notorious, I should say, for strong arming, especially tourists. If you can't speak Thai, you don't know what's going on. So, number 1, I would say avoid Pat Pong in general. But number 2 is if you're going to go there, I would say stay on the ground floor, stay on the ground street level, I should say.
Yeah. I will say this, though, as I think one of the side effects of being more popular with tourists and having the night market, like if you want to go to a red light district, but want to sort of have the option to be distracted by other things, Pat Pong is a good place to go to, because you've got that night market that's really famous. There's some really good restaurants around there, like Madrid, which is right
That's
in the middle
true.
of
I mean,
Patpong.
yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that if you're looking for like a variety of things, then you should probably go to Patpong. But it is therefore more touristy and more scammy and more haggly. And to me, it's just got an edge to it, you know?
Yeah, it's certainly not. I wouldn't call it a nice place.
Yeah,
but
it's not nice.
There's more to distract you there than there are at the other two places, at Cowboy or Nana.
So, Greg, I'll ask you this. So let's say you've got a friend, a visitor, a friend of your cousin, and he insists he wants to go to a go-go bar. You tell him, avoid Patpong, and he says, okay, fine. So what would you say would be your next advice if you actually decide to go to a go-go bar at, let's say, Nana or South Cowboy?
Well, I would say, first of all, watch out for pickpockets. Just use your head in any big crowded area of any big city.
That's true. Good idea.
And my advice too would, my first advice would be, don't get drunk. Like, I know these areas are party areas, but having a few drinks is fine. But once you have too many drinks, they're bad places to be.
No, I would agree. I mean, even though I think that Nana and Soy Cowboy are not that scammy, it's true. You're still a target. Anytime you're a tourist or expat, you're still a target. And the drunker you get, the bigger of a fool you look like, and that's just a big target on your back.
Yeah.
I would say my next piece of advice would be if you do decide you're going to go, like maybe you're in Nana or Cowboy and you want to check out one of these bars, the first thing I would say, which I think is common sense, but it bears, it should be repeated, that just please be nice and treat everyone there with respect and be kind to all the workers there, whether they are go-go dancers or whoever. You don't know their background. You don't know where they came from. They also probably are from a different culture than you. So if you decide to check out the places, judging or trying to look down on them is a huge mistake. Just be sensitive, be a decent person, and I would just say keep it light and smile and be respectful.
That's good advice. It's great advice. Well put. I think a lot of Westerners, when they come in there, they might bring sort of some pre-existing stereotypes or some baggage with them, but you got to leave that outside. And when you go in there, everyone's there to have a good time and to run their business. And yeah, just be nice. Don't get drunk. Be nice and treat people the way you want to be repeated. It's a golden rule, Ed. It's what we learned in grade 2.
For sure.
It applies here too. So another piece of advice I would give to people is to always ask for the price before you get into anything, whether it's a drink or a meal or what have you. Personally, I've said, I've never spent a ton of time at these places, but I have been down there a few times and I've never had a problem. I've never been ripped off. I've never had anything go wrong, but you still need to ask in advance, how much is this going to cost me? And just so you have an idea. And, just because you pay 120 baht for a drink, if someone asks you to buy them a drink too, it doesn't automatically mean that their drink is also going to be 120 baht. So it's good just to get this stuff out of the way right up front, just so you can avoid any confusion and hurt feelings and what have you.
Absolutely excellent advice. Even though I think that outside of the upper floors in Patpong, I haven't heard of a lot of like scams, like horrible scams in these places.
No.
But I have heard of people who end up with a final bill that they totally were not expecting. And it's usually because they've broken one of our rules. Like they got really drunk and they bought a bunch, they bought a bunch of drinks for themselves and they started buying drinks for girls and they didn't ask how much they were.
Right. Exactly.
So then you get
your drinks are 120 baht and the girl drinks are 300 baht. So.
Yeah. So then you get your 5,000 baht bill when you were expecting it to be like, 1,200 and, all right. My next piece of advice I think is obvious, but sometimes something you think is obvious, other people don't. Don't try to take pictures, in the bars or anywhere near the bars. I guess you've run some tours. Maybe outside on the street you might be able to take some pictures. Maybe I'll let you speak to that. But as soon as you go into these places, you don't take out your cell phone and start taking pictures. I would just say, number one, it's rude. But number two, they might snatch your phone out of your hand and smash it on the ground. And so it's just not a smart thing to do. And again, I think it's obvious. I think most of our listeners who are amazing people would not do that. But you cannot take a picture in these bars. Now,
well, I'll tell you who would do that, Ed. Me.
You would. And why is that?
I have in the past. In my early days, I was an idiot.
Really? But you're saying you got away with it though.
No, I didn't, and that's why it's great advice, because
funny.
I thought it'd be really, and this was in the early days, like I had like a Nokia phone or something like this, and I was like, ooh, I'll just like sneak a quick picture, nothing salacious, just of sort of like the general environment of the place, because
Right.
these you just don't have places back home that have stages in the middle of the room with 15 girls on stage. Like those things don't exist. So just the architecture of the place is worth sharing with your friends at home. So I was like really sneaky, and I took a quick picture, and dude, 2 seconds, a dude was on me. Delete your photo.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I had no idea you had done that. I mean, listeners, you got to trust us. Like, this podcast is not planned out enough for Greg and I to have our shit together enough to have figured that out. Yeah, it's so funny. But yeah, I think, it's funny you brought that up, because I have another friend who, and he had been here a long time. Like he tried to get away with it, and got caught. And it's just, I don't know. It's just not smart. Well, it's funny now that you have fessed up. I have a minor confession, although I didn't really do anything wrong. Once, again, many years ago, this is probably 2008, 2009, I was in a go-go bar in Patpong, and a girl came out with a huge snake. Like, I don't know if it was a python or boa constrictor.
All right.
And, she's dancing with this giant snake. And I saw someone else take a picture, and it seemed cool. So I asked if I could take a picture, and she said, "Nung Roy Baht, 100 baht." So I did negotiate and pay the 100 baht and snap a picture of that.
I think that's worth it. $3 for $4 for a late night.
Yeah.
A cool picture.
Well, the long and short of it is, unless you have kind of explicit permission, which is extremely unlikely, don't try to take a picture.
Yeah, I thought I was being sneaky, but these guys are on the ball, man. And I was scared. I was like, delete your photo. I'm like,
Oh, yes.
So I showed him, and I was like, here we go, delete. I'm sorry, sir.
Right.
And one more piece of advice, too. I would say, don't be cheap. Don't try to negotiate everything. Like a lot of places, basically, you get better service if you tip. So like Ed, 100 baht for the snake, sure, why not? You could probably have bargained her down to 80 baht, but why would you give her 100 baht, right?
Right.
Like people are there, they're working, it's late at night, they probably don't have the most pleasant or stressless jobs in the world. So, tip well for good service. Don't be cheap.
No, I agree. It's funny, this issue is really kind of general, and I'm not sure I've ever stated it this way before, but I'll just use an analogy. Like, if you're in a taxi and the guy wants you to pay 200 baht for something that should be 40 baht, you should never pay the 200 baht. Right. So I hate that. But then again, if the tab is 37 baht and you can't give the guy 40 baht or 50 baht, and you've got to get your 3 baht back, that's a problem.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
You are the problem.
Yeah, you are the problem. So whatever, there is a happy medium in it. So I agree. I mean, it's just, when you're in those places, those people are there to make a living, and most of them live on tips. So I would say definitely check prices ahead of time, as we said. But be nice, be respectful, and tip well.
Yeah. Good advice for a lot of businesses, but it applies especially to these red light districts.
For sure. Well, I've got another piece of advice, and again, this is a sensitive topic, but Greg and I have always been clumsy enough to stumble into areas we probably have no business traversing. I would just want people to be aware that at all of these red light districts, there are bars that are staffed with transgender people, and sometimes an entire bar is kind of transgender. In Thai it's katoi, so there are katoi bars, but then sometimes transgender people are mixed into the population. And the bottom line is, if you care, then I would simply just ask. If you don't care, that's cool. But it's something that, I think it's worth mentioning. I'm sure, Greg, you're familiar with this story about Thailand, and the story involves like a guy who meets a girl, and he later finds out she's not really a girl.
Yeah, such a cliche. I mean, it was in Hangover 2, right? It was a huge plot point in Hangover 2.
Everyone knows,
such a cliche.
Everyone knows it, and it is annoying as someone who's lived for 20 years to just hear this trope over and over again. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there's some. The bottom line is in this case, the trope is not based on nothing, and I have seen guys get surprised. I've seen it.
Well, I think it's like a lot like living in Bangkok always. Like not everything is as you expect it to be, and you need to educate yourself on what you're going to get into. And getting into the red light districts, you need to know what's coming up. So do your research. I will say though that there are traditionally, my experience anyway, some transgender sort of, I guess, freelancers is the less PC term, who sort of stake out the area outside of Nana Plaza on Soi 4, and they can be quite aggressive with guys walking in.
Yeah,
so
that scene on Soi 4 can be a little bit crazy.
Yeah, and that's my other piece of advice too. And I've never seen. Okay, I've only seen this once. I've seen it once, but if you see any violence, any fighting, any arguing or yelling, I would just say get the hell away.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You are never going to win whatever's going on if you get involved.
Dude, that's great piece of advice that it just slipped my mind. I mean, again, I think this is kind of obvious, but never get involved in any kind of physical conflict in a red light zone. Basically, in a foreign country, you should never do it.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is the red light districts here are fascinating because you don't see a lot of bouncers around. So it's not like in the States or the West where there's like burly guys in front of strip joints. It's not like that. But,
unless you take a photo, then they show up pretty damn fast.
Well, that's my point. That's my point. Just because you don't see bouncers, it doesn't mean that they're not there.
Right, but they don't have like an obvious presence here where
that's right.
Everyone's sort of aware that these guys are here. We better keep things under control.
But they are quite notorious for being ready to do violence. I've just heard many stories about this, and it's typically a drunk expat, and who knows, maybe they deserve what they got. But the bottom line is, don't be that guy, or I guess that girl.
Exactly. Yeah, that leads back to my first point. Don't get drunk. You're just asking for trouble. And my final piece of advice for me is when you're leaving these places, like Ed was saying earlier, they're usually populated by a lot of tourists. And the taxis are there in force, and they're probably going to give you the old meter broken thing or overcharge you for a ride or something like that. Whenever I'm leaving one of these places, I always just have it in my mind that I've got to walk at least 3 or 4 blocks away before I'll even think about getting a taxi.
Excellent.
I just think that's good advice.
Excellent advice again. Yeah. The taxis around these places tend to be the harder types who don't want to use the meter. So yeah, moving away. I like that. That is good advice.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we finish this minefield of a topic
right.
that I think we did okay with, we're going to do the same thing. As you're leaving, just get far enough away that you don't have to deal with any of the grossness of bartering with a taxi driver while you're drunk or whatever.
Right.
Just walk a few blocks away and get in a taxi, and you probably won't have any problems.
Yeah. Good idea.
Yeah. So that's it, man. Boy, like I said, that was a minefield. All right, good stuff. Well, keep all that in mind if you ever visit Bangkok and want to go to one of these places. But like I said, if you don't, there's plenty of other cool stuff to see, which is actually why the podcast was started in the first place. So
definitely.
There you go. All right, let's get into some love, loathe, or live with, where one of us picks a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something that we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept as just something that we have to learn to live with no matter how we feel about it. This week, it is my turn.
Cool.
All right, Ed, you've eaten a lot of Thai noodles.
I have.
Different types.
I have.
Different flavors. And you sit down at a street side noodle stall, and you got that usually it's like a little plastic cup holder with 4 slots for cups. And there's often sugar, chili, some type of vinegar with chili, and then just straight vinegar. So I'm going to ask you, what do you think about the practice of putting vinegar on your noodles?
That's interesting. I thought you were going to go in a different direction, but this question about vinegar is interesting because I've gotten much more into it since I've been in Thailand. And, it's funny because I hadn't really connected it or thought maybe it came from this experience that vinegar is kind of part of Thai condiments. I mean, vinegar is common in Italian food, but I think you're right. I feel like back in the States, it's not like there would be vinegar on the table.
No, vinegar is like a baking ingredient back home mostly, right?
Yeah, I mean, balsamic and stuff. I guess it could be like a part of a salad dressing.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's kind of up there. With Thais, it's like sugar, salt, vinegar, chili.
Yeah.
And it's always all there. So it's funny. I think I'm actually going to go. I don't know if I want to say. I think I'm going to lean towards love. I'm pro vinegar.
Yeah.
I'm pro vinegar in my food.
Same. I love it. I love it so much, actually, that I put so much on my noodles that my wife thinks I'm insane. She looks at me like I've ruined my food. Like she takes personal offense at it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it adds like a nice little sort of like sour tang to your noodles, especially. So I'm huge for vinegar. Mega love from me.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. Maybe not a mega love, but yeah, Thai food definitely has turned me onto it, and I definitely use more vinegar than when I lived back home.
Yeah. All right. Official stance of the Bangkok podcast: vinegar love.
Heck yeah.
Wasn't that a song by Golden Earring? No, that was Radar Love.
Yeah, not quite vinegar love. So, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we'd like to say thank you to Jonathan Morrell for lending us his support at the show shoutout level. Greg, what did you find out about Jonathan?
Well, Ed, as it turns out, Jonathan is one of those guys who has it all figured out. The kind of guy that I want to be. See, for about the past 10 years, he's been spending half the year in Thailand and half the year at home in the UK. So that's a pretty sweet life balance you got worked out there, Jonathan.
I agree.
Very jealous. And while in Thailand, he says he loves exploring the city in search of craft beer, which sounds like a great excuse to get out and about even more. I mean, you and me like exploring the city on bike, but if we're doing it in the pursuit of beer, win-win, right?
For sure.
Yeah. He treats it, I think, sort of like the carrot and the stick, except in this case, the beer is the carrot and heat stroke is the stick. So I'm not sure. What's to stay ahead of the curve. Anyway, Jonathan says his favorite place is the place called the Fat Cow on Lad Prao Soy 15.
Wow, that's out there.
Place?
Yeah, that place is out there. I rarely make it out to Lad Prao.
Yeah, I've never heard of the Fat Cow, but just to check this out, just this week, I learned that they also have a branch at Bang Hwa BTS station. So I think a field trip is in order.
Sure, that's not too far from us, actually.
Yeah, we can head out there and we can report back. And as I do with all these patron emails, I asked Jonathan for an anecdote, and he wrote this classic teaser, which makes me go, what? He says, sorry, I can't really think of any anecdotes, although I did catch dengue fever in Manila while living in a squatter settlement with a gang of vigilantes. But this is the Bangkok podcast, not the Manila podcast.
I love it. Maybe,
Dude, you gotta finish that story.
Maybe we need to hire him as a writer. Jesus.
Yeah, no doubt. That sounds like an exciting story. But he also says, I'm currently working 70-hour weeks in the UK, and I'm really hoping things will open up soon so I will be able to return to Bangkok in November. Well, Jonathan, we hope that too, and I'll tell you what, I will buy you the first couple of pints at the Fat Cow in Lad Prao so I can hear the rest of that story, because I want to know what the hell you were doing living in a squatter settlement with a gang of vigilantes.
For sure. Fat Cow it is.
Yeah, Fat Cow beers upon your return. Guaranteed. Thanks, Jonathan.
Cool. A final thanks to all of our patrons who will keep the show ad-free. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping support the show. Find out more by clicking support on our website and connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
Yes, we do. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube, chat with us online, or even reach out to me directly on Twitter, where I am BKK Greg, he of the 13,000 retweets. Thank you for listening, folks, and we will see you back here next week.
Definitely.
Testing 1 2.
Hello. So I got the fan on this week, but I have it turned away, but you're probably going to hear it in the background.
Oh, it's okay. My poor little MacBook is chugging along. I can hear the fan now. Thank goodness for RX-7 isotope noise reduction. Fit that on a t-shirt.